Good afternoon. My name is Jan Hill. I'm the mayor of the Haines Borough, and I'm very pleased to be delivering this proclamation on behalf of I Love Lucy Day. Whereas Lucy Harrell was an adventurer and a pioneer, she was an accomplished businesswoman and an airplane pilot. She was the only female Nordic tug captain in Southeast Alaska, piloting the Whiskers 3 up and down the Inside Passage well into her 80s. She lived an active and vibrant Alaskan life. And whereas Lucy relocated to Haines over 30 years ago and fondly referred to Haines as the gateway to paradise, she brought with her the attitude that if a person could make a positive change to improve quality of life, they should, and she did. Whereas Lucy continually gave to our community, most recently posthumously to the Chilkat Valley Community Foundation, the sum of $1 million to their endowment fund. And whereas Lucy was a true friend to animals, and through her longtime support of Haines Animal Rescue Kennel, has ensured that our pets in the Chilkat Valley have a safe haven. And whereas Lucy also donated significant amounts to the Haines Sheldon Museum, the American Bald Eagle Foundation, the Haines Borough Library, Hospice of Haines, the Chilkat Tlingit Dancers, American Legion Post 12, the Salvation Army, Haines Volunteer Fire Department, the Chilkat Valley Preschool, Big Brothers, Big Sisters, Venture Scouts, the Haines Small Boat Harbor, and the Fisherman's Memorial. And whereas, in recognition of Lucy Harrell's significant contributions to Haines's quality of life, now therefore, I, Jan Hill, Mayor of the Haines Borough, encourage all citizens to observe August 1st, 2020, Lucy Harrell's birthday, as I Love Lucy Day, with activities and acts of kindness that demonstrate and celebrate selfless giving. Happy birthday, Lucy.
I love Lucy!
All right, a big thank you, Lucy. Yay!
Hi, Lucy. If you were here, we'd tell you thank you so much for what you've done for us.
Just this number of things. Thanks a lot.
You're rolling.
Oh, I'm sorry. Thank you, Lucy, for all the fun we had at Bridge in the wintertime. That's it.
My name's Deborah Marshall, and I met Lucy Harrell on her Whisker 3 Nordic tug some 20 years ago in Petersburg when I was having trouble with their notorious currents at the dock. Her reputation preceded her as the only female skipper of a Nordic tug, and I was piloting my new 26-footer, and she was giving me pointers right away. So we knew of one another when I moved into my Haines cabin in the woods some 15 years ago. What I didn't know was what a benefactor and philanthropist Lucy Harrell had become to the Haines community in her 30 years of living here. She settled in the mid-'80s after 4 trips up the Alaska Highway, exploring in a camper that she bought with the money she saved from quitting cigarettes a year earlier. Her husband had been an avid pilot, and he had died in 1971, some 5 years after they had purchased Buckhorn Springs together outside of Ashland, Oregon. There they homesteaded tirelessly and flew together. She had gotten her pilot's license in her late 20s because, quote, it was too hot to do the dishes one night, and she and her fellow teachers went to the airport, unquote. She soloed 3 weeks later, and since then has had an aversion to the dishes. She had run her boat up and down the Inside Passage almost 20 times, often single-handling, and knew that her days were coming to an end. So when she asked me to crew for her in the spring of 2012, I gladly signed on. We were delivering the Whisker to the Seattle area for the Nordic Tug Rendezvous, and because she had friends to pick up for the return passage. There's plenty of time for conversation on a boat trip, and I quickly discovered that while the Whisker was dirty and unkempt and full of diesel fumes, I was in the hands of a consummate mariner. Lucy grew up crewing for her father on the Grey Wolf, a 60-foot wooden motor sailor. That, among other adventures, they took from Cape Cod to Seattle through the Panama Canal. Lucy's father was a steel magnate who moved west and made his fortune in the Pacific Northwest. She was 55 when she came into her inheritance and, as we know, generously shared her wealth with our community. Lucy studies the charts without glasses at the age of 87, changes her oil on the whisker every 200 hours, and has all her knots tied specifically for single-handing. We get underway early and put in 12 or 14-hour days. She is an expert at docking, which is a big challenge without a bow thruster. Lucy is losing her balance, and I did find her asleep at the wheel several times. I insisted on 2-hour watches, which she agreed to. At one point, I came up to the wheelhouse and Lucy had lost her bearings. And for the first time since she bought the whisker, the trip log was recorded in my hand instead of hers. Aging catches up with even the most ornery of us, but before the end of the trip, she had skippered us through Seymour Narrows exactly at slack tide in a pea soup, radar-only fog. Whee, she says, impressive. At one point, I asked Lucy what she is afraid of. She got very thoughtful and quiet. We are in Petersburg eating halibut cheeks and asparagus for dinner. Lucy screwed up her monkey face with her furry knit eyebrows and says, I guess I'm afraid of not measuring up as a human being. Said our most treasured philanthropist and community benefactor. Well, Haines, let's toast to Lucy Harrell, who absolutely measured up as a human being with her generosity to the Chilkat Valley in so very many ways.
Thanks, Lucy. You're my hero. Nobody in the history of Haines ever gave more. You're a wonderful person. Miss you a lot.
I'm on Chilkoot Lake, and I just want to say thanks, Lucy, for all your contributions you put into this town. Bye.
I'd like to say thank you to Lucy Harrell. She was very generous with this town, and she even paid to have people's private property cleaned up. Thank you, Lucy.
Chilkat Valley Community Foundation is happy to join in celebrating Lucy Harrell and her legacy. CVCF is all about improving the quality of life in the Chilkat Valley, and I can't think of a single person who has done more for this community than Lucy. Lucy served on the Borough Assembly for 5 years. She was president of the Haines Women's Club. She was instrumental in providing funds and the land for HARC, the Recycling Center, Haines Assisted Living, St. Lucy's, the Sobeloff-McCrae Wellness Center in Veterans Village. Lucy gave the borough money to paint the public safety building, to help relocate Totem Park, and to put more defibrillators across town. She provided funds for the new library and preschool. She helped pay for the restoration of the carousel at the fair, and she bought 7 sculptures for the museum's garden. When Lucy saw a need in this community, she stepped up to fill it quietly and with very little personal fanfare. Lucy gave generously over the years to so many of our local nonprofits: KHNS, Hospice, the Fair, the Museum, the Bald Eagle Foundation, Library, Haines Arts Council, Haines Assisted Living, Becky's Place, the Legion, Big Brothers Big Sisters, the Swim Team, Salvation Army, Venture Scouts, HARC, her church. The list literally goes on and on. Lucy gave generously because she could and because she cared. And as her final gift to the Chilkat Valley, Lucy left $1 million to the CVCF to help ensure a happy and healthy community for years to come. She did this because she loved this community she called home. And so, on behalf of all of us at CVCF, I want to say thank you, Lucy Harrell. We love you and we miss you.
Happy birthday, Lucy. We love you. Thank you for all that you've done for Haines.
So Lucy was such a role model for modesty and practicality, I think. And she really didn't ask for very much in life, but it may be a helping hand when she needed help. But she gave so much of her wit and her good health and her generosity. One thing I liked about her was that she never really thought about success or failure. She just took life in stride. And I think, wow, it would be great if we could all be a little bit more like Lucy. You know, she was a great human being, and I want to be more like her.
We would just like to thank Lucy Harrell for all her generous donations. She ended up leaving us $25,000 when she passed away. She donated a goshawk, which is inside the museum, and she was just a delight every time she came in. She'd bring her guest here to show them the goshawk. Thank you, Lucy.
Hospice of Haines has been serving the Chilkat Valley since 1996, providing care, volunteer services to the terminally, the chronically, and the critically ill and their families. Lucy Harrell has been a huge support to our organization. We thank her for her wonderful smile, her contagious laugh, and her generous spirit. Hospice of Haines, board, staff, and volunteers love Lucy.
Thanks, Lucy, for all you've done for Haines. Through the Community Foundation, I know that. Just through all your keeping nonprofits going, and HAL and Veterans Village, and just being an outstanding citizen. You're a real inspiration for all of us, and we just love you and thank you for everything.
Okay. Well, I knew Lucy for a long time. I was down on the boat harbor working on boats, and somebody approached me that she needed a little job done on her boat, so I went down and did it. And I guess I did it right, because the next time she needed something fixed, she called me. And that started a long relationship between Lucy and I, mainly around her boat. She loved that boat. She really enjoyed that boat. And I asked her early on in our friendship, what's the hardest thing about this boat? She said, finding somebody to go boating with. And so, 4 or 5 years later, my mother was up to visit. Mother and Lucy were about the same age, and Mom was sitting around the house with nothing to do, and I said, hey, how'd you like to go for a boat ride? She said, what kind of boat? Because I have a fishing boat. She wasn't so wild about the fishing boat part. I said, a little old lady's cute little yacht. She said, yeah. So she and Lucy got on the boat, went out in front of town, and played cards for 4 hours. Just drifted around out by Low Point, played cards for about 4 hours, and they were fast friends for years until my mother passed away. And I think Mom made the trip between here and Puget Sound with Lucy at least 2 times. Took my sisters along too. But yeah, Lucy, she was quite a gal. She was a heck of a navigator. We had, I guess it was 15 years ago, Coast Guard guy came to town and gave us the opportunity to get tonnage licenses, Coast Guard licenses. It involved navigation, seamanship, and stuff like that. And it was a test that wasn't really easy to pass. So there were about 12 of us in the class. I think 6 or 8 of us passed the course. But Lucy was in her 70s at the time, and she was the first one done with the written section of the course. She had loved navigation and boats her whole life. She used to tell me stories about going through the Panama Canal when she was a kid in a sailboat. And when we were all sitting there in the class doing our tests, written tests about navigation and lights and stuff like that, Lucy was sitting there, and she finished her test, walked up and handed it to the guy, and she was the first one done. All of us kind of looked at each other like, whoa, there's the standard. So anyway, she passed. I don't think she ever applied for her license, but she passed the test and did really well in the class. But so back to working for Lucy. Worked for her for quite a while, and she had such a big heart that she used to call me up and invent jobs for me to do when she thought I needed to work. Being a fisherman, a lot of times I didn't have work in the winters. She'd find something for me to do, either working on the boat or around her house or something. Pretty interesting. It was real big of her, and I think she did the same for a lot of other people in town with easy mortgages on homes that she owned and would sell people, and cheap rent. She did a lot for this town. One thing that impressed me about Lucy, and probably very few people know it. You know, it was just a little thing, but it was kind of funny. One winter I was working on the interior of her boat. She wanted the interior redone, and she didn't want to reupholster the cushions, but she wanted the new overhead, and she wanted it to match the cushions. So she was down south, I was here, and I asked her what color she wanted, and she said she would pick out the color and bring the material up for me to finish the job. Well, she brought the material up from Seattle, and it was a perfect, absolutely perfect match for the cushions. And you know, if you've ever been to the paint store, you got 85 different colors of light blue. She picked out the perfect one. I said, Lucy, how did you get so close? She says, that's one of my many talents. Thank you.
All right, I'd like to thank Lucy Harrell for the remediation of the new property where I plan on building my house. Thank you very much, Lucy. You're a wonderful steward.
Thanks, Lucy. Hey, Lucy, you have done marvelous things for our community. For the fire department, you've given defibrillators and AEDs. For Haines Assisted Living, you've allowed many of our seniors to stay in our community well beyond the time that they normally would. So, great contribution, great lady. We love you.
And thanks for the $1 million to the CVCF. We love it.
Take
we
care.
love Lucy.
Hi, Lucy. From everybody here at KH&S, thank you so much for all your donations and your inspiration during our fund drives, and just for all the love you gave us.
Okay, I've known Lucy for many years. We played bridge together. In fact, we both ran for mayor together. And a very interesting thing, Tess is a friend I've had since kindergarten. And Tess was the executive secretary to the headmaster of the Branson School, which is where Lucy went in Marin County. And also, she went to the same school as Julia Child. Who knew that? And playing bridge with Lucy, Lucy was, she's confident and having a good time. And Lucy was someone who was always nice to be with.
Well, I've known Lucy Harrell for a number of years, and she's always been one of my favorite people. I've always admired her and her accomplishments in life. It doesn't seem as though she has let anything get in her way. I do remember meeting her at SeaTac Airport when Julie and I were flying back to Haines, and she was at the gate waiting as we were, and we had an hour or so. And she told me a story of when she was headed northbound, just she and her dog from Seattle coming back to Haines in her New England tug, and had gotten late in the day, so she pulled into a harbor there along the British Columbia coast and dropped anchor, had dinner, and turned in. In the morning, it was socked in fog very heavily. You can almost, she said, I could almost not see the bow of the boat. But she has radar. So she had breakfast, she weighed anchor, and with the radar, she made her way out, and she looked at her radar screen, and all these little boats that had pulled in that evening were lined up behind her in the fog because they knew she had radar. So on the radar, she said it looked like Mother Duck and her little ducklings following Lucy out of the harbor and out until they got out of the fog. And she thought that was pretty funny. Lucy and her generosity in Haines has been a tremendous and unbelievable gift to this community. She has donated so much money to a number of organizations in town. Our Women's Shelter, our museum, Eagle Foundation, and others that she has been overly generous in donating money. And what she has done to establish HAL for the elderly people of Haines is nothing short of miraculous. Haines should have a Lucy Day to celebrate her every year for the things she has done for this community. I wish I had spent more time with her when she was alive.
Lucy Harrell, I love you. I remember how you so graciously and brilliantly negotiated the land to go for Haines Assisted Living right downtown. You worked with the developers and the designers to make it a great facility for everybody to feel right at home and tell great stories. And then when I became the chef, you shared all your favorite recipes with me and the great cookbook that you put together. Thank you, Lucy Harrell. You're the greatest.
Lucy and I were on the assembly together a long time ago, and we were on a meeting up in Nome, I think, and Lucy and I were roommates. But we were right next to the bar, and it was too noisy for me, but Lucy could do it, so I moved out. But what I wanted to see up there were muskox. And Lucy, at the very last day, Lucy said, "Come with me." And she had organized a tour with one person, and he took us out to see the wild muskox. And I was so grateful. But that is Lucy's way of being in the world. It was just lovely. I loved it, and I've always been thankful that I got to see wild muskox.
My name is Jan Hill, and I'm one of the dance leaders and drummers for the Chilkat Dancers from Haines and Klukwan. And we typically are practicing and performing this time of year. And our friend Lucy Harrell used to come and watch us at different times when she could find us. Lucy has always been a supporter of our culture and of our Chilkat Dancers dance group. I know there were times when Mr. Studley would bring her by the cruise ship dock when we were there performing for our visitors. And she always gave us a high five. She's seen us perform at many different venues. I think some of those she probably hadn't planned to attend, but she likes our group, and we always knew how much she supported us. And a few years ago, she supported us with a very generous donation to our dance group, which we can use for travel or to work on regalia. We do get invited to go to other communities to perform and participate in some of their celebrations.
Lucy had several very basic philosophies that were something that she lived by with absolute principles and integrity. She did not waver. And one of the really good basic ones that I've incorporated into my life, and I'd see how it fits into her life and even into the larger Christian philosophy. She was a Mormon, and also the greater philosophy that would relate to the integration of quantum mechanics and God and Christ being connected to everything. But that was the enlightened selfishness. So what is enlightened selfishness? Well, enlightened selfishness, if you understand what that means really, is that you are acknowledging that we are connected with everything. Not that you expect to get something from somebody, but what you're doing for somebody else. You essentially are not just doing for them, but you're doing for yourself. And that's the enlightened part, when you understand that you're actually helping yourself by helping other people. She went way out of her way to help a lot of people, especially those people that she felt needed help the most. And another phrase that she coined later on was, I liked a lot, and we kind of disagreed on this, because I always said, Lucy, we live in paradise. And she said, no, Jim, Haines is the gateway to paradise. It is.
If she didn't know it, she would study until if you asked her a question, she would study and find the answer. It wasn't, she didn't blow you off. She would figure out what the answer was, and it's like, well, this went that, okay. I don't know. She was just good company. She was up for anything. I mean, to her, everything was an adventure. It was like, what do you think? And in that aspect, her and I were not a very good pair, because we used to like do things to mess with each other. It's like, yeah, I bet she won't do that. I bet she will. And I mean, that was the fun part of being around her. She was just, I don't know, she wasn't afraid of anything.
Believe it or not, I remember Lucy stepping foot in Haines. My high school classmate, she bought my high school classmate's property, and she told me, Jeanette said, Glenda, Lucy is a wonderful person. She will be a good attribute to the community, and she was right. Thank you, Lucy. We miss you, and this is an awesome gift. Thank you again.
Lucy, if you're up there somewhere looking down on us, we just want to say that you helped inspire us to really embrace our town by your example. And thanks! We love you, Lucy.
My name is Colleen Adams. I'm board president of the Haines Sheldon Museum. Thank you, Lucy Harrell, for everything you've done for the Haines Sheldon Museum over the years. From the donation of these beautifully locally crafted sculptures in our garden to the generous contribution to our endowment, which she left us in her will, Lucy has always been a dedicated supporter of the museum. In remembrance of her generosity, we will be dedicating this sculpture garden to Lucy as the Lucy Harrell Sculpture Garden. We love Lucy.
Oh, hey, thank you, Lucy, for everything you've done for Haines.
Amazing woman and person you have been to this community, and just thank you for blessing us with your life.
I love Lucy.
Carolyn Goolsby here. I'm the director at the Haynesboro Public Library, and the Haines Library loves Lucy. Lucy was a major contributor to the library's building when we built this beautiful space for the people of Haines. She was a major contributor to our legacy fund, and the interest from that buys materials for the library every year. She got a lot of people on board, and she contributed a large amount to our current capital project. Lucy was a great friend to this library, a great friend of our community. We love Lucy.
It's hard for me to do because I miss her every day. I really do. She was, I don't know, sometimes she was my sister, sometimes she felt like my mother, but she was always my friend. And she was a really special lady. There's not going to be another Lucy ever. Not ever. And there's never going to be another Lily.
Mommy, I miss you so much. I love you, Mommy.
Lucy, I love you.
I love Lucy.
I love Lucy.
Thank you, Lucy, from all of us at Hark, from the bottoms of our hearts. Thank you.
Happy birthday to you. Happy birthday to you. Happy birthday, dear Lucy. Happy birthday to you.